Okay. Great panel. Thanks very much. Don't you love Lady Gaga? Wasn't she amazing in the movie? Go straight, stay authentic were messages I picked up from that one as well. Very simple. Comes through a lot of this this afternoon. Okay, so another change of gear. We cover all the issues here at Content Makers, even the delicate ones. So the whole issue of kids online and marketing to kids online, we have assembled a fantastic panel here, a really expert one, expertly interviewed by my old friend Joe Lazauskas, this time I got it right, of Contently. So can we welcome onto the stage Darren Shou, Symantec Vice President of Research. We have Chris Willliams, President and CEO of the beautifully named pocket.watch, not Pocket Watch. And my old friend Dylan Collins from SuperAwesome. A big round of applause for them, please.
Well, that was some incredibly epic intro music for us.
I'll take it. Sure was.
Guys, we only have about 18 minutes on the clock, so let's just dive into it. You know, kids today are really impressive. I'm pretty sure the other day I saw a 10-year-old with a speaker's badge here who made me feel really insecure about myself. But it's also, for a lot of parents, for a lot of us, a worrying time. Oh. And let's start with fear. What worries you the most about the way that kids are interacting with technology today?
Yeah. For me, I think it would be that we have a generation, maybe it's Generation AI, that's basically beta testing what it's going to be like to grow up with a synthesized life form, something that's generating content, generating entertainment. And I think that we don't know what that looks like when they turn 20, 21, 30 later. And I think there's a lot of unknowns about it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we've basically got, more kids than ever who've now become the fastest growing digital audience using an internet that was never built for them, right? And to Darren's point, this is technology, this is an internet built for adults, now being used by kids, right? Holy shit.
Yeah, I'll try and be a little contrarian, only to the extent that we've, try and look at the bright side of our kids having access to the most powerful device in the history of time that connects them with every piece of information and every human being on the planet. So, I think it's important that we parent, and I think that ultimately, like it is with every generation and every generation's new technology, whether that's video games or television or whatever that of the moment anxiety is that we have as parents in terms of what it's doing. Ultimately, I think you got to be great parents and control moderation and screen time and all those things. But I don't like to dismiss the powerful devices out of hand.
Yeah, let's go back to the AI part, because that's something that's super new and unnavigated, which is that you have all these kids growing up with a device that can talk to them, can respond to them, can understand their needs. How do we ensure that kids can actually differentiate between humans and AI?
Yeah, if you think about the differentiation, I don't worry so much about the identification of whether they're interacting with AI so much yet. I worry about if they develop mannerisms and behaviors learned from interacting with something that's not human, and then at some point later in life, they start using those mannerisms with other humans. That's where I think things get a little bit odd, because even like with my daughter talking to something like Alexa, and she'll say, "Alexa, stop." Like, there's no please. I know they added that later, and I'm very thankful for that. But that took a few years, and we had this whole group that grew up just learning that the command was not to say please.
Right. I mean,
those manners.
I mean, smart speakers are in danger of turning children into dicks, right? They're just why? So I totally echo Darren's point. And
Light mischaracterization.
Okay, sorry.
Okay, let's go with it.
I wouldn't want to put words into your mouth, but I think one of the challenges is we have so much of this technology that is being built by incredible sort of engineers and great tech companies, but none of them have chief children's officers. None of them are thinking about how are these pieces of technology going to be used by children who inevitably end up using them more than adults. So we see toy companies who have chief technology officers. Why don't we see technology companies that have chief children's officers?
Well, you know why.
Great idea.
You know the answer. because then they'd have to acknowledge that kids actually use their products, which is a big issue for many companies.
Well, yeah, because it says no one under the age of 12 or 13 is using this service right now, so having that might be interesting. But, I think just before we pat ourselves on the back for always rushing out the next smart thing out there and being like, we did it, we solved the math problem, let's rush out the door, let's actually make some smart things safer, not just smarter.
Do you think there should be like regulation for AI within the children's space?
I think what we need to think about for all of AI is how to make it more transparent so that we as parents can do parenting. How do we make it so that it's transparent and understandable so to know what content's being delivered to my child? Remember, it could be being dynamically created on the fly, personalized for them at that moment in time.
Well, machine learning in general already affects our kids in a major way, particularly in their media consumption, right? I always think about, these algorithms are optimized for time spent, right? And that certainly creates the rabbit hole that we're sending everyone down, and that includes kids. But I think there's an education and a literacy that they should also be learning from and doing in a practical way to get better at understanding the difference. My kids are learning about fake news at school. Like, this is,
Wow.
literally what to click on, what not to click on.
But you think about this chief children's officer role, right? Like, what would that person be responsible for? What are the tangible actions that they can take inside a company like Amazon with Alexa to make it safer for children?
Well, I think one of the things, and someone actually told me earlier today that apparently this is illegal, but one of the things that they should do is impose a rule where any engineer working on a product that's going to be put in the family home has to have children themselves, right? Because I think a lot of products are designed for the idea of children, right? Kind of a naive assumption of what a child will do versus the reality of what they will actually do with a piece of technology. And I think you have to be a parent to probably understand just how much stuff kids can really get into and manipulate. When you think about sort of Alexa being used to solve homework assignments and things like that, it's like no one thought of that, right? But if you were a parent, maybe you would start to think about that. So I think those sorts of designs, that sort of thinking in terms of, look, if we're putting a piece of technology in the home, how is a 4-year-old or 5-year-old going to think about it? We should have more psychologists involved. I think.
Well, but their philosophy is to create a platform that developers feed, right? So I think their expectation probably is that developers are coming up with all these usually great, sometimes nefarious things for people to consume and our kids to consume.
Yeah, but it's I mean, look, we've got 170,000 kids who go online for the first time every single day, right? If this was like an alien civilization that landed on the planet this afternoon, right? Tomorrow, every single technology company would have a chief alien officer responsible for onboarding this civilization, right? Except with kids, no one seems to be thinking about that, which is super weird, right?
No, I'm going to go right home and actually have a chief alien officer. I think I'm going to put that on my business card. But to answer your question, I think, I think about how kids are going to be using things like augmented reality in the future. And what I think is great about it, there's amazing benefits for it. But what's going to happen when my daughter or my son is seeing the world and experiencing it very viscerally in a way that I'm not seeing it? We literally are walking down the street together. We're not just on two different phones. We're seeing, hearing, and experiencing in a completely different reality. How do we talk about that reality? How do I parent when we don't experience the same thing?
I think humans are pretty resilient.
Oh,
I think we'll be okay.
Kids. I look, you're the voice of optimism.
I am.
Yeah.
I
love
always
the
the voice of
optimist
optimism.
corner over here. Yeah.
Well,
I'll scoot towards the optimism.
because I like the idea of our kids being smarter and more connected, and I like the idea of them growing up to be better than we are. And if that means, look, Elon Musk says this all the time. We're already cyborgs. Our kids are already cyborgs. We carry these devices. We're connected to these devices. You walk down the street, whether it's Lisbon, New York, or London, everybody's on their devices. We just have terrible inputs to that device, right? So, being our thumbs. But that stuff will all improve, and our kids, look, that's only gonna keep moving forward. And again, I'm very oriented towards the parenting side of this. I think companies have to take responsibility. I like the idea of a children's, chief children's officer at companies. But at the end of the day, nothing beats parenting.
Oh, totally. I mean, technology can't be a crutch for parenting, right? But I think things like sort of parental sort of dashboards or portals where you can actually see what your kids are doing and sort of making that like a mandatory thing if you're releasing something into them. Like you've still got to be able to help parents more, right?
Yeah.
Or just build it in from the design perspective so that we have access to it. So each parent can do what they need to do. And we enable the children. I actually meant it from a point of, if we explain to the child that, and we see how they're using something like augmented reality, then they can come tell the parents, here's how I'm dealing with this world. Here's what I need you to help me with in this world. Here's how I'd want you to parent me. And so I think you're absolutely right to the point of your optimism. Yeah.
So what I'm hearing here is, one, a better focus on developing products with children in mind, actually focus group and testing them for that. And two, giving more tools for parents to understand how kids can use their devices and give them more control over creating a better experience for those kids.
Yeah.
Oh.
I think you also have to understand all this stuff is reflective. Kids are reflecting their humanity in these things too, right? Like we always talk about, the misunderstanding of what people are watching, what kids are watching on YouTube, right? People think it's this, and there are some awful, nefarious things on there. But generally speaking, they are watching people, for example, we talk a lot about play, right? Kids like to watch other kids play, whether that's imaginative toy play or playing with a science experiment or playing in the kitchen. If you cook, you like to watch the Food Network. If you like tennis, you like to watch people play tennis. Your kids are the same way. They like to watch other kids play, and that will inspire them to go play and do those things. They are learning a lot from that, and I just think it's a lot of mischaracterizations that actually all this stuff, the use of it is typically reflective of their general desires that have existed forever, right?
Yeah. I guess it's easy to sort of figuratively or maybe literally throw out the baby with the bathwater.
Yeah.
But, look, I worry about some of the things, like someone in the audience is probably thinking about stopping cues, right? What are those stopping cues when everything is about, let's get you to the next video faster, let's get you to the next content faster,
Fair enough.
let's get you to the next targeted ad faster. And we do think about a lot of stopping cues as developers. That's my background as trade, and thinking about it. And we had one where we were wondering, what would it really take? And this is the industry that can help us solve that problem. It's not going to be a dialogue. It should be something better than that.
Well, I think you've got this notion of like privacy by design, right? Which is sort of a general philosophy. But I think in the kid space, we need more and more of responsibility by design, right?
Absolutely.
Well, I was going to say the only way you get curation is if you demand it, right? Because the machine will always win over curation, human curation. I think Netflix and YouTube, they've all proven that already. They suck you down the rabbit hole. You watch the next thing that they put up in front of you, and they're getting better and better and better at it. And with kids, we do need curation.
Right.
And it's hard when you're fighting the monster that has, well, I don't mean it quite that way, but you know what I mean. These machines that are just so learning so fast.
But again, it's like the DNA and the genesis of all of these algorithms, right, was this notion that only adults were going to use the end product, right? And this is why we're going to have to go back and re-engineer and rebuild a lot of the internet around sort of kid tech or zero data or privacy and responsibility by design principles.
Absolutely.
And it's not just sort of like building a content platform and then kids are going to go there, because that's naive. It's never going to happen. But we've got to have sort of more tools, more frameworks for people to make it easier to do this stuff. And it's not an overnight fix, obviously. Like, it takes time. We've got to get to that point.
And looking forward, say, imagine it's 2030, what are some technologies that have emerged that we're not thinking about right now that are affecting kids?
Wow. By definition, I don't know if I can even come up with anything.
Darren brought up a lot of them. I mean, it's obviously AI is something that's going to have an
means
incredible effect.
Can I steal a thing
Yeah,
from
please.
you? So I think, like, when you walk into a store, physical store in 2030, and you pick up a toy, right? Instead of saying this toy is suitable for ages 5 and up, I think the toy is going to say this toy's AI interacts at a 5-year-old level, right?
You could have a nutrition label, right, on the device that basically says, here's what I do, here's what I'm good for, right? Just because we also do, as adults, we have an expectation that we are responsible for our own diet and what we eat and how we take care of our health. But that's different for how we take care of our children, for their different needs. Because why? Their bodies are developing. What is good for a 3-year-old is not the same which is good for a 30-year-old. So for 2030, what I would also hope is that, we're thinking about the fact that this is a developing brain we're talking about in a child. How do we want to design for that?
That's such an interesting concept.
And of course, it'll be a cyborg brain for you.
Yeah.
Child's going to have like
Phone machine at that point.
like, okay, we're at like 15 years from now, it's got a brain implant and.
I do think the AI aspect of it is something that it's difficult to look out to 2030 and really understand, because it's going to come fast. It's going to get smarter and smarter. It's going to offer incredible assistance that we don't have today. It's the next operating system, right? I mean, these are all the next operating systems.
Direct-to-brain content delivery.
Yes.
So if you look at something like what the DARPA agency has been able to do and directly address neurons in your brain, and now it's a small number, but imagine 2030. Let's address 1 million neurons in your brain, so we don't have to go through the eyes, we don't have to go through your ears. We just project a thought into your brain or knowledge. That's wonderful. I can learn, like in the Matrix, how to fly a helicopter in 3 seconds, but what am I going to worry about then? Take all of what we just discussed and say, okay, now how concerned am I about what message is going into the brain? What ethical advertisements are being directly plumbed in? Of course, the next hack is going to be on your brain, not your device.
Totally.
I think you're going to see, like, in some part of the world, like, you are going to see this huge anti-technology in children movement. Like, and I think it'll be siloed, right, and isolated. And I don't agree with it, to be clear, right? But I think by 2030, you are definitely going to see people really recoiling from technology.
We're already seeing
with
some,
children.
right? Germany, the Federal Network Agency has basically said we can't do smart watches and smart toys for children under the age of 16. I think that's an interesting development.
I mean, there were privacy issues around that,
Yeah,
too, right?
privacy
No, but
issues.
it always goes well when we make something, unavailable to kids. They never figure out a way to get it, right?
But so wouldn't that potentially then create a class system between kids who, say, can learn something in 3 seconds or 3 minutes through neural infusion into their brain versus those who grow up in households that are more anti-technology? Isn't that some dystopian possibility that we're going to have to face?
And I think even if you think about what AI is, what does AI eat? How does it grow stronger? It eats data, right? So if I say that my child cannot have her data recorded when she turns 20, right, in your time frame, will she be disadvantaged from the performance-enhancing effects of technology? They're going to save her health, prolong her life, better educate her, better connect her, versus
More literate,
right?
in data protection, like just the literacy around it, too.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, maybe I'd be harming her. Maybe the audience in 2030 would judge me as putting her in harm for keeping her from these technologies.
Just face it, our kids are going to live forever, and they end up as just,
you bring up one thing is, remember,
downloaded.
AI does live forever. It doesn't die. We die, but AI lives as long as electricity is flowing.
Last question, we have to answer it quickly because we're almost out of time, but can we really expect tech companies to self-regulate with this technology, or do we need to see a continued movement for stronger laws protecting kids?
I think you're going to see both of those things. There's like 170,000 kids every day for the first time, and technology companies can't get away from that. Like, you see it more and more in the news cycle every day. The chief children's officer is coming as a standard title across tech companies at some point.
Put a time frame on it because I want to bet you. But
3 years. 3 years.
I think as long as technology companies have commercial endeavors, this is a difficult thing for them to tackle. And as long as they're public companies that are judged quarter by quarter, or all that stuff, I think it's a really tough issue for them to tackle. I think the truth is some of them actually do a good job of making tech available on their platforms that is specifically designed for parents to use to protect their children. They just do an awful job of marketing it and bringing it and creating transparency around it for them. So a product like a YouTube Kids, which actually has whitelisting, all these amazing features, most parents have no clue, right? So I think if they marketed it as well as they built it, they'd probably be all right.
All right.
All right, well, there are 25 seconds before they shut off our mics, so we better get off stage. Thank you guys for being here. It's a lively discussion, and thank you to all of you.
Thank you.